middle of winter and like 10 feet of snow. So they get a true idea.
But you know what, Allison, there's lots to go and they spend the summer, I mean, the winter in Florida. So they just, you know, for them, it's great. They leave in November and they come back in April or something.
Just lifted it up so it showed more of you and less of the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
We are ready to go, Your Worship.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'll have a moment of reflection, please. Thank you. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I'm a director of the SEGBAY Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you.
And it'll be on E1, I'm declaring it.
Thank you.
Duly noted.
Okay, no public meetings or hearings, and we do have one presentation. Thank you, ladies. We do have a 15-minute time limit. I will waive if we're getting close. So welcome to both of you, and we'll enjoy the presentation.
Okay, thank you so much. So my name is Ian Company. I am the president of the SEGBAY Chamber of Commerce, and I first want to thank the Township of Severn, Mayor Briquette, and Council for giving us this opportunity to come and speak today and this morning. I'm sure you've all seen the agenda, and you can take a look there. The title of what we're looking at is Reconnect Port Severn Festival. Before I kind of dwell to this a little bit, I just want to give a brief background to how we came about to this. First of all, some of you may know I used to be and ran the Christie's Mill. We officially sold Christie's Mill in December last year. It is now being operated by new owners, and they are open and they will be at full scale this summer, which is super exciting. So I have been around a while, and I experienced the bridge before it was open, when it went under construction, and now I get an opportunity to look at things from a different perspective of it being back open, which is great. So one day we were at a round table in our chamber and our board of directors, and we were discussing this. And Roni Carli, some of you may know, the owner of the Port Severn General Store, she brought up that the bridge is open, summer's gonna hit, we think the restrictions are gonna loosen, which they did end up, which is great. And of course, we're still operating safely. And she, said we should do something. So we all kind of hemmed and hawed and thought about it for a moment. And then she said, no, we really should do something. I really want to celebrate this because finally we're back together. The two are meeting again. And it kind of made me think of a quote. A very famous Irish poet, Oscar Wilde, once said, "To live is the rarest thing in the world. Most people exist, that is all." Live is the rarest, and most people just exist. So I have a question, actually, and this might be unorthodox for this, but I want to go to yourselves, Council, Mayor Briquette, or the Township Severn, Betty, who would volunteer kindly. What do you think that means? To live is the rarest thing, and most people just exist. Can any volunteers say what they kind of take from that?
Who would like to begin? Oh. Councillor Cox, go ahead. You're on mute. You're on mute, Councillor Cox.
I guess I would say that if you live, you get out there and you enjoy life and you put in and you get out what you put in. And if you don't, you just flow along in life and exist, and you pass through, but you just never either give or take or get anything from it. You just live it to its fullest and enjoy.
Perfect. I'll leave it with that because you nailed it on the dot. Live to the fullest. That's exactly what this is about. For the last 2 years, with the bridge being closed, COVID, I think we've all kind of been just existing. And now we want to live. So if we go back to this, that's what Reconnect Port Severn Festival is about. We want to celebrate us being back at it again and living to the fullest. So if we look at it briefly here, where is it going to be? We're planning to use the park by the lock to host celebration. And if we all remember, we did have the Lock 45 there not too long ago, a few years back is where we had it. What's the date? Looking at June the 11th, we thought that that would be a perfect kickoff to the summer because it's past the May 2-4, all the hustle and bustle of everybody coming back just before we get into the thick of things, and we can set it off on the right tone. What are we looking at having? So we're going to have vendors, a small marketplace. We want to highlight some of our little artisans. There's been a lot that has happened in the last 2 years. Many people have reinvented themselves, started businesses in the area. So we're looking to highlight those people with booths and giving them an opportunity. Of course, the ribbon cutting, Mary Burkett and Mary Costier to officially reopen the bridge and celebrate it. We're going to have some children's entertainment. We're going to have some adult entertainment. We are looking to try and see if we can possibly, back in my day, I used to have good connections with Dylan Locke, to see if we can acquire and have them perform for us. We are going to have some food, and we're looking to have that from our Baxter Snow Riders, the Legion, and they're going to take care of that on their own. And we're just looking at keeping it simple: hot dogs, hamburgers. The Historical Society has also put an interest in having displays. And then we're going to have event passport, which I'm going to get back to at the end of this as I finish going through this. So our objective is to reconnect everybody, to live to the fullest, like Oscar Wilde said. And you can kind of see our budget that we've highlighted. I won't get into all of it there, but what we're looking at is the costs. Most importantly, you're all probably asking, what are we looking from yourselves? We're looking for in the amount of $3,000 in support of it, amongst a few other things, such as some personal assistance via social media pages, some parking assistance if we could use the bush area there. And then you can also see we have other sources of funding as well that we are going to. Most importantly, we are waiting on a grant from the County of Simcoe that we've applied for, and then some of the other contributions. And then you kind of see the site plan as well. And made sure to try and highlight both ends of the spectrum, or both sides, Township of Severn and the Township of Georgian Bay. Now, going back to, as a business owner, you always want to think, what's my ROI? What's my return on this? Because it is an investment from all of us. How can we make that tangible and see something from something that we're trying to celebrate? Well, go back to the event passport. What we're thinking of is, of course, if all of this works out, is a week before the event, we're going to go to local areas like Christie's Mill, Raleigh's, Port Severn General Store, the Cabin, and see if they will do something in connection with the festival that people will have a passport to come in and get stamps. So that way we encourage local residents and visitors to go to different places in light of this upcoming festival. And at the end of it, if they have gotten all the stamps, they can submit that and we'll have a grand prize for them. That way we can see the foot traffic and what we got as a result of this promotion. So I go back to that quote. I know I've said it a few times. Let's live, because I think most of us agree we've kind of been existing for a while. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the presentation. Well done. Deputy Mayor Dunlop.
Thank you through the mayor. Great presentation. This is really exciting. And I know when they had the opening a few years ago, it was a lot of fun. And I like your stamps that you would go around and see each person. And I would strongly suggest that the Township of Severn do the financial support that you've asked for, is $3,000. And I'll just give you a tease. I sit on the grants application at Simcoe County, and those will be ratified on Tuesday, I hope. So if you want to watch the County of Simcoe, you'll see where you're at. So it's all good. It's exciting, and let's kick this season off and get our neighbors back together again.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Cox.
Yeah, I throw my support in with the deputy mayor. I think that it's a great idea. I think that there's so many things that can be done and so many groups that will work with you. And if you need anything from anybody in Coldwater, just let us know. The Lions Club does have a barbecue that's mobile. So if something like that or any other things you may need, just call us and let us know, because we also have our BIA that could help out with anything too.
Councillor Bettesworth.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in favor of this as well. But just a question, if Andrew or someone else is online, where would we take this money from?
Sorry.
If I
Madam Clerk, sorry. Did you want to speak, or did you want Andrew to speak?
Andrew can go.
Andrew?
if I can, through the mayor to Councillor Bettesworth. At the moment, we've definitely spent all the funds that we did budget for the grants for 2022, and typically we have 3,000 set aside for SEGBAY for economic development, but unfortunately they actually requested that we don't provide it to them in 2022, but do bring it back again in 2023. So we don't have any room in the budget, but I'm sure we can find it's $3,000, and I'm sure we can find it somewhere.
Madam Clerk.
Thank you. So just a reminder to council that delegations can only be referred for report, referred to budget, or no further action taken. So at this time, if council's in general support, then I would just suggest that we refer the matter for a staff report, and then staff can come back, and maybe the director of finance can figure out how we would finance the $3,000 and let you know.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Dunlop.
Through the mayor. So to Andrew, a staff report, this committee needs to know, this is we're almost middle of April, and this is to go middle of June, so, or before middle of June. How long would it take you, Andrew, to let us know where you can find that 3,000 so that this committee can move forward?
If we didn't have an agenda deadline, I could have it done before the end of this meeting. But as quick as possible. So I'll get it onto the planning meeting, I guess, which is the next one.
Thank you.
So further to Deputy Mayor Dunlop's comments, I know that we have surpluses every year, and I did speak to our Director of Public Works yesterday, so I'm sure we can find the $3,000. Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, thank you. Do we have a motion, Madam Clerk? And thank you, ladies. Well done.
Certainly, your motion reads that the delegation from the Southern Georgian Bay Chamber of Commerce regarding a Reconnect Port Severn Festival be received and referred for a staff report.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Dunlop, second by Councillor Cox. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Enjoy your day.
Thank you.
We'll wait for Councillor
Thank you.
Taylor to join us. You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, consent agenda. Is there anything in the consent agenda? Councillor Taylor.
Yes, if I could ask F 2.2 be pulled for new business, please.
Thank you. Any others? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, do you have a motion?
Certainly, the motion reads that the agenda be adopted, including consent items, with the exception of items F 2.2.
Mover and seconder, please. Moved by Councillor McIntyre, second by Councillor Bettesworth. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Adoption of the regular agenda we've done. So H1, reports from officials. Planning report number P22014, rehousekeeping zoning bylaw amendment, comprehensive zoning bylaw 2010-65. Morning, Brad. Morning, Emily.
Morning, Council. So as Council may recall, there was a public meeting held at the March Planning and Development Committee meeting for the proposed housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment. These amendments do seek to provide clarity to the provisions of the zoning bylaw to allow for easier interpretation and application, along with various mapping amendments that have either been requested by the property owner, which do not necessarily warrant them making their own Planning Act application, or to correct errors or omissions that have been recognized by staff over the years. During the public meeting, there were two main questions that related to the applications that were raised by the committee and the public. The first being the properties on Island Road. So those lands were originally zoned SR3 or Shoreline Residential 3 in 2010. And those properties have, for the most part, already been developed, but they were inadvertently rezoned to the R1 zone sometime since 2010. As properties are required to have frontage on and direct access via a publicly maintained road, those properties right now would not be eligible for a building permit as they were previously. So this amendment before council today proposes to rezone the lands to the R1 exception 18 zone, and that would permit the frontage and access to be via an existing private road, which is known as Island Road. The second main question that came up was the definition of a farmer's market. So there was some clarification sought at the public meeting as to what would be permitted as part of a farmer's market. So OMAFRA and Farmers Market Ontario defer to the municipality for regulations of the use and to the health unit for things such as food safety. The comments that were provided were requesting to ensure that vendors other than prepared food could also attend and be part of the farmers market use. So the definition that is proposed makes specific reference to a periodic activity of a multi-vendor venue that can include vendors that are involved in agricultural, food, arts, and crafts, and that those products are just produced mostly by primary producers. So this definition would recognize that these types of events do include different and various types of vendors that would allow for opportunities for residents to host community-driven events that are comprised of a mix of primary produced, handcrafted goods. One point that we do want to bring to council's attention is that after the public meeting, staff did note that there was one definition that could benefit from some added clarity, and that's the definition of lot frontage. So the proposed bylaw has been amended to include a slightly revised definition of lot frontage that would allow for the inclusion of a daylight or a site triangle in the calculation of a lot's frontage. So planning staff are of the opinion that the proposed amendments conform to or do not conflict with any of the applicable planning policy documents. And if council has any questions related to these proposed amendments, staff would be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments? Okay, so I have a question, Brad. I actually have a few, just so that I have a better understanding. If we went to page 5, and where it says boathouses, section 4, section 3.212, boathouses and boat ports shall be amended by adding a new clause. And all I wanted to ask is that before anyone can build a boathouse or boat port, they have to have approval from Parks Canada, correct? The water authorities before anything can be done. Like, I'm trying to understand why we're changing this section. I'm sorry to spring it on you.
So to the mayor, if the property is located on a Trent-Severn waterway, they would require a Trent-Severn permit in addition to a building permit at the township. And the provisions that have been included in the bylaw here, staff did meet with Parks Canada prior to bringing forward any of these amendments. So the Trent-Severn is aware of these proposed amendments, and they are intended to mirror the Trent's policies as well.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Dunlop.
Further to that question, Brad, like anything that's done on the waterways, like anything, like I know even the Coldwater River, it's got to do with oceans and fisheries, because when we were working on the mill in Coldwater and putting up a retaining wall along the side, we had to talk to oceans and fisheries about it.
So through the mayor to the deputy mayor, it would depend on the type of work that is proposed. Those types of in-water work sometimes do require approvals from other agencies and different levels of government, being federal or provincial. Yeah. But when it comes to a boat port on a Trent-Severn regulated waterway, they would just require the Trent-Severn permit, and they would review those types of works to ensure that they complied with all of their applicable policies as well.
Okay.
Councillor Cox.
Yeah, through the chair to Brad. So let's just say I was going to put a boat port on the Black River. You don't need to worry about the Trent, because it's just straight with the township, and the bylaw, the rules would apply with what we want.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
That's correct.
Thank you, Brad. So if we could just go to page 6 at 1.4 with the garden suites and the accessory buildings. So at some point, we're going to remove garden suites because it's going to be a right to be able to build an accessory building on one's property if it meets all the requirements, correct? Is that the way I understand it? Oh, Katie? Morning, Katie.
Morning, Mayor, Reconnect Council. That is correct. So eventually we will be bringing forward an amendment, as we previously discussed, to recognize the ability to have multiple dwellings on one property. So likely we will be removing garden suites then. However, we may still keep it. It is still in the Planning Act. But as we previously discussed, we need to put those policies in our official plan before we can put them in our zoning bylaw.
Okay, thank you. So if we go to page 6, 1.3, I struggle with these flood hazard overlays and the flood fringe and the flood plain. And I know the only one that I know of, and I'm sure there are others, is the one back on Peninsula Point Road. And it's been brought to my attention that the MNR has the mapping wrong. Is there some way we can reach out to the MNRs to have them fix the mapping? Because it ends and then it doesn't go anywhere. And I don't understand the whole crux of it. It's a complicated, like there's floodway, floodplain, flood fringe, which I struggle with. You're smiling, Katie. So, okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Burkett. The reason I'm laughing a little bit here is that our director of planning, when she first started with the township, had very much the same struggle. So how we've always thought about it here, how it was explained to us from the consultant who wrote our bylaw, is that the floodplain is an entire area that may flood. So I think floodplain is a pretty well-known term to most people. So there's what's called a two-zone approach within planning documents, and that's recognized at the provincial level. And then there's just basically a one zone approach or a regular floodplain. So for example, there's some mapping from 1980 for the village of Coldwater that establishes a floodplain. We call it something slightly different because that's how we operate in planning. So it just establishes a minimum opening elevation, but that's essentially the point of the floodplain, is that there's a minimum opening elevation for windows, doors, that kind of thing, and also access routes like driveways. It's in case of an emergency, you want to be able to get people out of there or get emergency services to them. So the two zone approach is basically taking that floodplain and separating it into what is likely to flood, say, for example, every spring, and then what is only likely to flood in the event of a major storm or a major flooding situation. So the floodway is the area that you would basically not be surprised that it would be flooded in the spring. You know, pretty much every spring there's some water there, and that's the floodway. The flood fringe is an area that, you know, maybe once in 50 or 100 years, there's going to be water there. And that's why it's called the fringe, because there might be some water there in a really significant event, but likely it would be stuck to the floodway. And that's the two zone approach. So there's different rules and different regulations for what you can build in the floodway versus in the flood fringe, just because it's unlikely, more unlikely, that there'll be flooding in that fringe area. So in terms of the mapping we're using for the Severn River in particular, which is where we have that two zone approach, it is quite dated. Unfortunately, the only way we'd be able to update that mapping is if the township undertook a flood study. So there is wording going into our new official plan that will say, you know, we are looking to do a flood study. We are looking to update that mapping. Certainly a lot has changed since that mapping was first done by MNRF or MNR at the time. And it's not something they've ever updated again, to our knowledge. It was just something that was completed, I believe, in the 1970s, and nothing's happened since. So we did previously, I believe, under council direction, reach out to Severn Sound Environmental to see if they could help us with some flood mapping studies. But unfortunately, it would be a significant undertaking from the township if we were to complete a flood study. The mapping we have now basically reaches from Washego on the Severn River, near Washego, about halfway down maybe from the Severn River. So it does encompass quite a lot of area, and there would be some significant costs involved in redoing that flood study. However, it is probably something the township should be looking at in the future. So there will be wording in our official plan that we should be considering that in the future.
Thank you, Katie. So based on that, some of the applications that come forward, if we don't have those updated documents, how do we approve a building permit then? If they are with, thank you, go ahead, Katie.
So thank you, Mayor Burkett. So essentially site-specific applications, although the mapping is there, we allow people to ground truth it on their own property. So the mapping from MNR has elevations, and that's where that's how the mapping is made, is through different elevation points. And that's what is based on the minimum opening elevations, right? Is a certain elevation. So when people have their lot grading plan done, for example, if they're building a new house, let's say, and their property has the floodway and the flood fringe, which is very popular. We're just looking at one the other day. We're making sure that the elevations are plotted on that lot grading plan, and an engineer is certifying that the house is going within the flood fringe or not within the floodway. So essentially in the flood fringe or not in the floodplain at all, and making sure that those openings are above that mark. So if it's not possible, or if through a planning act process, such as a plan of subdivision or a condominium plan, or a severance application, if it's determined that someone has done the site-specific work, so they had an engineer go out and measure the elevations on that specific property, if it's determined that it's not applicable on that property, then we place them into a site-specific zoning. So that's happened on a few different development files in the township, where we've realized, you know what, maybe in 1970 that property was in the floodway, but since then they've added fill, or it was mapped incorrectly to begin with. We don't know what the situation is, but we put them in a site-specific zone that essentially says that the floodplain provisions do not apply.
Okay, so that's what I was getting at. So regardless of the mapping from the MNR years ago in the 70s, we now have an engineer come and look at the specific property, and he looks at it and puts a stamp on it and says this is fine wherever the resident wants to build their home, regardless of what the mapping says from the MNR.
That is correct. Okay.
Okay, we got it. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to page 10, 1.16. This is exciting, Katie. Thank you. Brad, Emily.
That's good.
Okay, page 10. The lot frontage, and and you're looking at different lines when I'm reading it. Why wouldn't we ask for a survey? Or are we doing this based on what the resident says? Or am I misreading this? Like when I read this, I sort of struggled with it as to how we arrive. The definition of a lot frontage shall be amended to read as follows: the straight line distance between the intersection. Why wouldn't we have just the lot surveyed? The onus on the homeowner to do it. And then, like, how do we arrive at that? Or am I misreading it?
Yeah, so to the mayor, we do commonly see surveys be provided for these purposes. Through a recent development, we were reviewing to ensure that lots in a new plan of subdivision did comply with the minimum lot frontage requirement, and staff noted that the definition could add or benefit from some added clarity to allow for the inclusion of a daylight triangle in the calculation of a lot's frontage. So I do have a little diagram here that I can bring up if council would like to see that, or if that gives you enough.
Okay.
So if everybody can see this here, we would have a corner lot here at the intersection of two streets. In this area in the hatching is commonly taken by the municipality for a daylight triangle to ensure that there's clear sight lines as you approach the intersection. So under the current definition, a lot's frontage would be measured as this red line. However, staff are looking to add some clarity to the definition to allow for the inclusion of this daylight triangle in the calculation of the lot's frontage. So the amended definition would just clarify that this portion of the daylight triangle can be included in that overall calculation of the lot's frontage.
Perfect. You spoke to that earlier. Thank you, Brad. I just didn't understand it. Okay, what about page 11, 1.20? So the definition of a motor vehicle dealership shall be amended to replace a building or structure prior to where a dealer displays with a lot or part of a lot, which includes a building or part of a building. I'm not understanding that. Maybe just some, Katie, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Burkett. This is very timely, actually, for me in particular. I believe, Mayor Burkett, this might ring a bell for you too, although I won't mention this specific property. What we've experienced in the past is that sometimes people have, say, a motor vehicle repair shop, and they also sell a couple cars. So you could view that as the car sales are accessory to the repair garage. But really, I think what we're trying to recognize here is that it could be a dealership, a motor vehicle dealership, although it's not a dealership like you and I may think of a dealership. You know, it's not Toyota, it's not Hyundai, it's not one of those big name brand dealerships that is primarily selling cars and has a big building with a big showroom, and then, you know, has a little repair garage at the back or whatever. This would be recognizing the fact that you could just have basically a used car lot. You know, there may just be a little tiny building there with one office space, and then you have some cars outside for sale. So our current definition speaks to a motor vehicle dealership being a building or structure, not the use of the land. So it's just a little bit complicated. As council may know, you require a dealership license or permit or something from MTO. MTO needs a letter from us that says it's allowed to be a dealership. So we've in the past had to say, well, they fix cars there, so they're allowed to sell cars there. We haven't been able to say straight that that's a motor vehicle dealership because it didn't meet our definition, because our definition refers to a building or structure rather than the use of the land.
So that's Omvik, and I think we're talking about the one on Fairgrounds Road. So does the property have to
we're talking about a different one.
Okay, good. Anyways, does the property, if they're going to do this, does it have to be rezoned if it's not on, or does it have to be on commercial property?
Yeah, so to the mayor's question, it definitely would still, we're not changing what properties would be allowed to be a motor vehicle dealership. We're just clarifying the definition of motor vehicle dealership. So it would still be those certain commercial and industrial properties that are allowed to have a dealership.
All right, thank you. Okay, page 11, 1.22. Thank you for bearing with me. I haven't got that many more. The outdoor recreational use passive shall be deleted in its entirety and replaced with the following. So does that mean that if a piece of property is used as recreational, they can put trailers on it?
I may be able to speak to that, Mayor Burkett. If not, I can defer to our senior planner, Katie Mandeville, if she'd like to add on as well. Essentially, no, like you wouldn't be able to just park trailers on it. It's more of the idea of it's an unobtrusive use. You kind of just show up, use the land, walk around. There's not really any structures or any maintenance associated with it. It's sort of just the enjoyment of the land as it exists. It's sort of just like a passive use. You kind of, like I said, there's no maintenance to it and there's no structures associated with it. So it wouldn't promote or allow for the parking of like recreational trailers and things like that, especially on vacant properties without a residential use associated with that trailer. So but perhaps Katie would like to add on. I'm not sure. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Mayor Burkett.
No, that's fine. Thank you. But if it's a recreational piece of property, can they apply down the road to have trailers put on it or no? A minimum amount? Is that something we would entertain through this? Katie?
Thank you, Mayor Burkett. I mean, that would be separate. Like if someone wanted to apply to put trailers on it, they would have to go through a zoning bylaw amendment. This definition wouldn't allow them camping, as we separately define a tourist camping establishment. That's a separate land use in the bylaw. Essentially, this definition you're looking at here already existed in the current bylaw. What we are doing is clarifying that it could have picnic areas, as that's pretty common. I think if someone's gone to, say, a conservation area that has trails and other passive uses, sometimes there's picnic tables or a little shelter where you have lunch or take a break. So we've added that into it. We've also added that it's not for profit. So that's the main clarification we've added here, is that this is meant to be some kind of, for example, the Couchiching Conservancy lands, Crown land, not Crown land, sorry, Simcoe County Forest land, that kind of use, where it's mostly walking trails, bird watching, that kind of natural environment. And then, the ability for them to have a spot to take your lunch. And then mostly what we're trying to clarify is that it's a not-for-profit situation. So it's not a business that's running and offering this type of service.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Dunlop.
So is the confusion here actually saying recreational and you're thinking of a recreational trailer? Is that the confusion?
I think what I was, if it's for recreational use, I thought maybe we could change the zoning in a trailer or have trailers on it. That's where I'm confused, but I understand what it's for now. Thank you. Just one other one on page 12, section 5. You've changed the zoning on Bowles Lane. Page 12. Yeah, so Parterillia Island concession 15, parts 1, 2, 4, 5, 45, 44 Bowles. My understanding is Bowles Lane is just a section out at the end of Muskoka Street, and the rest of it has been bought by a homeowner. So how can we now change the zoning on something that we actually have no road to? I'm just curious. Do you know where, Katie?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Burkett. So essentially 4544 Bowles Lane is the property that contains the private road of Bowles Lane. However, we're not really sure how this came to be, but there's no zoning on it right now. It just is, it displays as nothing. So there is a piece of property, perhaps I could show you on the there is a page in the bylaw that has the property. So
I couldn't.
If you scroll down to Schedule 5, which I can just put on the screen there so you don't have to scroll.
Okay, thank you.
You will see that, so this is the private road, which is known as Bulls Lane. So very
go back to the beginning. Take your cursor and go all the way back. Right there. Is that Muskoka Street there?
Correct. This is Muskoka Street.
So my understanding, that whole shaded area where you just went with your cursor all the way down has been bought by somebody. So we do not own that. Bulls Road is only at the very end. There's only a sign there. Go back, yeah, right there. That's all we have is that little bit of area right there. So that's what I'm confused about is even though this section is called Bulls Road, it's been bought by somebody. It isn't our road.
That's correct, Mayor Burkett. It is a private road. So similar to lots of other private roads in the township, it's located on private property. So there is a small portion of property located with it that in theory someone could build a house on or a cottage type structure. And then this Bulls Road is a registered right of way that provides access to this property as well as properties to the south. So there is a registered right of way over it, similar to other private roads in the township, and it is located on private property. And all we're trying to do here is make sure that there's a zoning placed on this piece of property. So in order to allow someone, if they wanted to build some kind of structure in this area, we need to make sure the zoning bylaw applies to this property.
So thank you, Katie. So if someone buys that piece of property and they're not granted, are they entitled to be granted permission to use that private road? Is it written somewhere, or can the person that owns that road deny them access to their piece of property?
Good question, Mayor Burkett. So that's mostly a legal question the township tries to not involve ourselves in. However, I have seen documents which establish a legal right of way over this piece of property in favor of this piece and the property to the south. However, it would be up to a lawyer to say if the person who owns this has the right to block it off or the right to impede that access.
Sorry, Katie, by us changing the zoning on it now and allowing it to be a buildable lot, are we, is the corporation in trouble for doing that because we've allowed it? And now we get dragged into this legal fight as to who has right over that private section of road to get to their property?
I'm certainly not a lawyer, so I can't speak to the liability included with this. However, every other private road in the township has zoning rights attached to it. It is the goal of the bylaw to zone every piece of property in the township. So I'm not exactly sure what would happen if someone came in for a building permit on a piece of property that has no zoning. I think it's ultimately deemed to be open space, maybe under our bylaw. But certainly it would have just caused a headache for us. So we just want to make sure and that this does have a zoning attached to it. However, you know, the ability of people to access or not access their property over a private right of way is ultimately a legal question.
Okay, thank you. And those are my questions, and thank you for answering the questions. Any further comments? Do we have a motion, Madam Clerk?
There we go. The motion reads that planning report number P22-014 dated April 6, 2022, with respect to zoning bylaw amendment Z2203 housekeeping be received. And further that pursuant to section 3417 of the Planning Act, no further public notice, public meeting be required with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. And further that the housekeeping zoning bylaw be brought forward immediately.
We're in a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Stevens, second by Councillor Cox. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Moving on to H1.2, planning report number P22015, proposed telecommunications tower, 1515 Carli online. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, or Emily, did you want to speak to it?
Hi, Mayor Burkett. I certainly don't need to speak to it if no one has any questions. This tower has been heard through 2 delegations to council this spring. So certainly available if there's any questions. However, I think the staff report and the 2 delegations provide plenty of information regarding the proposal.
Thank you, Emily. Madam Clerk, do we have a motion?
Certainly. The motion reads that planning report number P22-015 dated April 6, 2022, with respect to a proposed telecommunications tower at 1515 Carli online be received, and further that the Township of Severn supports the proposal as presented in attachment 2 to staff report P22-015, and further that the Director of Planning and Development be authorized to provide written municipal concurrence for the ISED application to give effect to the Township's endorsement.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Stevens, second by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And here we go. H2.1, Administration Report 822015, Reamendment to the Noise Bylaw Hunting Provisions. Who would like to start it off? Madam Clerk.
Thank you. So following the adoption of the bylaw back a month or so ago, we didn't receive any feedback until the press release went out advising of the new noise bylaw, at which point we did receive feedback, 99% of which was directly related to the discharge of firearms from localized hunters. As a result of some additional research, conversations with the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters, there is a proposed amendment that staff are bringing forward, which would provide an exemption to anyone with the required provincial card, licenses, and hunting within the regulated season. Beyond that, we did receive a couple folks just asking for clarification with respect to farms. Farm operations have a complete blanket exemption to the noise bylaw. It's detailed in section 13.3 of the current bylaw. So farm operations at any hour of the day are welcome to continue as they do. We just, in the noise section, added an additional provision for the sake of being able to find it easily with respect to livestock predation. So, but later on in the bylaw, there is an entire exemption for farm practices in their entirety. With respect to target shooting, this is an area that the township does receive a fair number of complaints about. So staff are recommending that we approach this based on an exemption request basis. So if someone wants to have a target shooting range on their property, all well and good, provided that they meet the federal requirements of making sure your range is safe, projectiles are not in a position where they could stray onto neighboring properties, and making sure that there's warning systems in place to tell people they're entering a shooting area. Those are set out actually on the RCMP's website as the federal requirements for target shooting. So the approach that staff again would like to take on the target shooting with council's concurrence is that they are approached on a request for exemption basis. It also gives us a list of properties as to if we get complaints that we know that it is a property that's got an exemption, so there's no need for any attendance at the property. We do, part of the concerns that we have received, particularly with respect to target shooting, is that some of these larger rural properties do have a strip of residential that's right near them. And we do have some folks that have decided to set up their target shooting right along the backside of residential lots. So, and we have calls that we do receive from fairly alarmed parents that have children in their backyard. So staff are recommending that we do keep some hunting restrictions or general firearms restrictions in place. Those that are good hunters that have all their required cards and licenses, the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters completely agrees. Absolutely grant the exemption. I do understand we have our gun club in town that meets current regulations, so we can provide an exemption for a one-off property for them as well. So again, going down the same thing as target shooting and such like that, but we do have that issue over the summer months in particular, which is generally outside the hunting seasons, which are mostly spring and fall, where we do receive a fair number of complaints. So that is why the original recommendation was put in place with respect to restrictions on firearms. And with that, staff are happy to go with whatever direction council wishes. But again, the proposed exemption is to do, this prohibition shall not apply to those in possession of a valid Ontario outdoors card with the associated provincial hunting licenses within the provincially regulated hunting seasons. So, and with that, I think that from staff pretty much lays out what we're proposing.
Councillor Taylor.
Through the mayor to Allison. So can we make this work on Crown land as well for target shooting?
From our research, we do not have the legislative authority to govern Crown land with respect to hunting provisions.
Yeah, just a comment here. It's too bad that up on Tower Line, there's target practice going on there, and there's no concern for, there's no inspection, and people are walking around there. That's just a comment. So for clarification, I'm just not sure at what point do you have to request gun license and hunting license, etc.
Madam Clerk.
So say it's turkey season, which it is right now. So say if you have your outdoors card and your license says that you're good to hunt turkeys, then you're good because it's the current hunting season. But if you tried to hunt a deer right now, it's not deer season. Okay. So, and then you'd be in trouble with the province, who would then come out and send their wildlife conservation officers out. There are tip lines with respect to Crown lands, though. They do still have to abide by the RCMP and federal regulations. So with respect to discharge of firearms and owning a gun and all those things. So if there are concerns, you could always, I can provide counsel with the tip line that the federal government has set up for hunting outside of regulations, or if there's concerns, then their conservation officers can attend.
And just a comment, thanks again for reacting. It certainly sparked a lot of interest when it got put on our webpage, and to know that we have farmers that work all night, so like drive their tractors all night. So I'm glad that they're exempt as well. And then I'll ask more questions in our new business as well. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Dunlop.
Through the mayor to Allison. So that discharge of firearms timing, has that given, is there any leeway for that now?
Madam Clerk.
So with the exemption that staff are proposing with the respective card licenses and in the provincial season would grant the exemption. So if turkey hunters wanted to go out at, because from what I understand and have read now that it's 30 minutes or a half an hour before sunrise.
Correct.
That will adjust over the course of the year depending on when that is. So if right now our bylaw says 9 o'clock and the sunrise is at 7 and they have the provincial license and they have the provincial card, then they would be exempt and they could go turkey hunting.
And duck season too is, I think, one of the other ones that was, they want to be out there in their blinds before daylight. So anyway, that's good if it's looked after. Thank you.
Councillor Cox.
Yeah, through the chair. I think we're overstepping. I think that the hunting thing is covered by the criminal code, it's covered by M&R, it's covered by migration game bird regulation, it's covered by provincial laws. And I believe that we should not even have anything to do with it, because if you have your license and you're doing exactly what you want to do, we're just putting it down on a piece of paper for the township. We have one bylaw enforcement officer. I don't know how we're going to look after it. I'm sure game wardens are already out there looking after all that. So in my opinion, I think the whole hunting part of it doesn't even need to be there because it's already regulated by different parts of the government and by different agencies. My other concern is the exemption part where you were talking about. There's more paperwork, there's more of this and that, and more people are going to be calling in and saying, somebody is doing this, and now we have to have the police come out, and do they know there's an exemption? And do these exemptions last like for years, or do they just have to get them every single time? Another amount of paperwork with one bylaw enforcement officer. And my other one is, that's our problem. We have one bylaw enforcement officer. All these things that we're talking about, except for maybe the noise part of it, are already covered somewhere else. So we're just doing a repetitive bylaw. So in my idea, I would not even bother having it in here.
Thank you. Councillor Bettesworth.
No, I have nothing. No, I didn't have my card up.
Sorry. Any further comments? So I will echo what Councillor Cox has said. We are now trying to enforce something that is totally out of our hands. It's not our issue. The enforcement is there. And I'll give you an example at the back of Carli Online. As they approach the county forest, we have I have had oodles of calls of people shooting back there. The police showed up. The police look at how they're shooting. They're shooting in a safe manner. They do nothing. We, again, can do nothing about it. And I want to remind council that the only reason the noise bylaw is here is because of the problems we've been having with short-term rentals. This is a learning curve for all of us. And I think we need to take hunting right out of it. Hunting isn't our scope of work. We have nothing to do with it. It's police through the MNR. It's police through the police services. We only have one bylaw enforcement officer. Your phone is going to be ringing off the hook. The gun club that's in our community has been there for 30 years. I hear nothing. I live around the corner. We're now going to open a Pandora's box by having a noise bylaw when they have been shooting there for over 90 years. We also have the police that shoot on Burnside Line. And I know that they're provincially regulated, but again, they are making noise and shooting. And it's something that I feel strongly about, because of the calls that I have received from residents that make sense, that tell me that they are regulated through their outdoors card, as Madam Clerk has stated, they are regulated through the MNR. So I think we need to take it right out of our noise bylaw. That's how I feel. Deputy Mayor Dunlop.
Through the mayor, yeah, I've never had as many calls on anything that we've ever done as this and hunting. So I would agree. Let's get it out of there.
Thank you. Any further? Councillor McIntyre.
Yes, through the chair. I don't think it can be overstated. The hunting is not shouldn't be in our bailiwick. It's the police and it's the game wardens and others, MNR. It's not. I think in our best interest to have it in a noise bylaw at all. Agreeing with just about every.
Any comments? Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. As always, staff are happy to move with whatever direction council wants to go. So all we would do is add a line into the motion that says that the noise bylaw be amended to remove section 5, firearms, from the bylaw. The other first and last sections would remain. So.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
What about target shooting? And is that separate from hunting, or would you classify that as part of hunting?
Based on the discussions, this would be removing any and all regulations with respect to firearms. So target shooting would not require an exemption.
So to Councillor Taylor's comments, I think myself, I have target shot on a remote farm. And again, we're governed through the police. Like, it's not something that township staff or Cody needs to come out and look at. If we're not shooting in a safe manner, and we know that from what's happened back at Tower Line Road, we've had the police officer here and told council that the onus is, yes, the police comes out and has a look, and if they're shooting in a safe manner, they're able to do that. Like, we do live in rural Ontario. Like, this is a Pandora's box, and if we go down that path, let's let the authorities that take care of this, the police and the MNR, enforce it, not the township. It's not our duty. Madam Clerk, sorry.
So if council chooses to repeal section 5, one thing staff can do is ensure that the reporting numbers for wildlife and the conservation officers and the tip lines are on our website, so that if anyone's looking for it, then those numbers are readily available and people don't have to look for them.
Good. Perfect. Thank you. Any further comments? Deputy Mayor Dunlop?
So through the mayor to Allison, could you just quickly at some time give us emails, those numbers, that we've got them readily, so when somebody calls us to say blah, 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 we can say, this is the number you need to call. If you could do that, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely will do.
Thank
you. Okay, so did council want the proposed motion?
Yes, please, Madam Clerk.
Okay, so the motion will read that the administration report number 822-015 dated April 6, 2022 regarding an amendment to the noise bylaw hunting provisions be received, and that the noise bylaw be amended to remove section 5 firearms from the bylaw, and that the proposed amending bylaw be brought forward immediately.
Thank you. Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Cox, second by Deputy Mayor Dunlop. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to new business, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I'm hoping through the mayor that can Allison answer Mr. Russell's email. I guess there's a new answer for it than we had before the meeting. So
absolutely, we'll be pleased to respond to Mr. Russell.
Okay, I think just glancing through it, I think the issues as he's brought up, we've discussed it, and by taking firearms out, I think that's going to solve the issue. And he's one of the people that do take target practice seriously there, and respect that, and hopefully the clerk can send a response back to Mr. Russell.
Thank you. Do we need a motion for that, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Your Worship. Just it's a straightforward motion that the correspondence from Mr. Dave Russell regarding the township's noise bylaw be received for information.
Thank you. Mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Taylor, second by Deputy Mayor Dunlop. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Bylaws, Madam Clerk.
1 second here. Buried in paper. Okay, so that bylaw, the motion is that bylaws number 2022-16 to 2022-20 inclusive be and are hereby ready for second, third time and finally passed. Just before council votes on that, I will make note that the bylaw amendment being 2022-17 will be amended and will be different than the one that's in the agenda, so that we repeal section 5.
Thank you. Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Cox, second by Councillor Stevens. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Any announcements? None. No closed session. Confirmation bylaw, Madam Clerk.
Certainly. So the motion reads that bylaw number 2022-21 be and is hereby ready first, second, third time and finally passed.
Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Taylor, second by Councillor Stevens. All in favor? That is carried. And adjournment. Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Cox, second by Councillor Stevens. All in favor? That is carried. I think, thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy your day.
Thank you.
Councillor
Have a great day.
You too. Thank you. Councillor Betzworth.